Jewish people, we follow a lunar calendar. That's our main calendar, lunar calendar. So when you say, what's your Jewish birthday?
Excuse me, just for a second. For some reason, I'm not in the same chapter as you. What chapter are you?
Phone was on when I looked on my phone, um, um, when I looked on my phone, it was a day ahead for some reason, 2 days ahead. Okay, so this is the mitzvah of machzis shekel, and we were talking about it yesterday. We didn't talk so much in detail what it's for, but generally speaking, every Jewish male has to give a half shekel, which is half of one of the currencies then of silver, to the temple. And the purpose of it is to buy communal sacrifices. And we'll say that later. That fourth chapter goes through that. Now, the communal sacrifices have to be given to everybody. So every male has to have an equal portion. It's ages 20 to 60. You give this tax. You can't give more. You can't give less.
So it's chapter.
Oh, what they had back then, were what they called a shulchani. A shulchani is a money changer. Guy who does change. He simply does change. So everyone needed a half shekel. So people would typically go and bring a shekel, and you would get half a shekel, 2 half shekels, right? So what you would do is, therefore, when a person would go and you give a shekel, get 2 half shekels back, he would give a little bit more on the shekel, and that was called a kolbon. Therefore, let's say two people come and they're sharing a shekel, and they say, here, give us 2 half shekels, they would have to give a kolbon. Someone who doesn't need to give a kolbon, for example, 2 women or 2 slaves, they give a shekel, they are exempt from a kolbon. And if there was someone who is obligated to give a kolbon and someone is exempt, so women don't give a half shekel and slaves don't give half a shekel, so they don't have to go through this process. So similarly, if you have one who's liable to, and one for half shekel and one who's exempt, for example, a person who gives a shekel for him and his wife or him and his servant, he doesn't have to give a kolbon. And similarly, kohanim, they don't have to give a kolbon, and someone who does it through a kohen doesn't have to give a kolbon. If you give a shekel for you and a poor person, or on your neighbor or someone else in your city, if you're giving it if you're going to give it to them as a gift. So every poor person needed half shekel. So people had to sponsor for them, right? And they say, okay, here's a half shekel me, and I'm going to give. You can't just give money to the temple and say, here's a full shekel, count him here, or everyone in my shul. Every person had to give a half shekel. So if you're changing for them, if you're going to give it to the gift, you don't have to give a kolbon, because you're giving half a shekel as a gift. And if you give a half shekel through lending them, then you need to give a kolbon. So if they're going to have to pay you back, the person you're getting a half shekel for, then you have to give a kolbon. Brothers who didn't divide what their father left to them. So their father left a inheritance, and they didn't divide. And similarly, business people that give a shekel for both of them, they are exempt from a kolbon. When do we say this? That they have central money, partnered money. However, if this one's bringing his money and this one's bringing that money, and they're mixing them, then they need to give a kolbon. So if they have an account and they're giving from the account, which is owned by both of them. If they're doing business after they divided and then they go back together, they have to give a kolbon until the money actually belongs to both of them. The actual money they're using belongs to both of them. Brothers and partners, which have money and which have an animal and money, and they divide the money, they have to give a kolbon, even though that they still are partnered with the animal. If they divide the animal, then divide the money, then they don't have to give a kolbon until they divide the money. Okay, you don't say, let's say in a partnership you have 50% equity, right? So it's it is always technically divided. Everything can be divided at any moment, but we don't say that when it hasn't actually been divided. When you give a shekel to hachodesh. So we mentioned before, there's a concept in the Torah of hachodesh. Hachodesh means you donate to the temple in Jerusalem. Now, hachodesh is not just donating to a synagogue or to a Jewish purpose. There is a concept of hachodesh. In other words, when you dedicate something to a Jewish purpose, it belongs to the Jewish purpose. However, hachodesh is, in the Bible terms, is when you donate to the temple. And it's very, very strict. That thing actually belongs to the temple. So, if you give a shekel to hachodesh, in order that you should have, it should be should consider the half shekel which you're obligated to, and you take the shekel from what you take from the halves, you need to give 2 korbanos, because if you had 1 shekel, if there was a shekel, you would have to give 2 korbanos. So what did you do? basically, okay, so this is what you could do. You could donate money to hachodesh. Let's say you have a house. You say I have extra house. It belongs to the temple in Jerusalem. Temple in Jerusalem says, hey, your house is in Prescott. We don't need that, right? So what could you do? You could say, well, I wanted to dedicate my house, but I'm going to give you the money now and redeem my house back. I'm going to buy my house back by giving them the money. That's what you could do. So you gave a shekel to hachodesh, and then you're buying it back. To give a half shekel, you have to pay 2 kolbons. What is the amount of a kolbon? The kolbon is this additional amount that you give. When you give half a shekel of 2 dinar, the kolbon was half of a ma, which is 1 in 12 of a dinar. So, it's really interesting in the currencies in the Bible, everything starts out, you have like a loaf of silver, a certain amount of silver, and then you basically coins, a gram of gold, et cetera, and that calculates. So the half shekel actually fluctuates in different times. There is this really interesting computer game that my kids have been playing lately, which actually is a money currency game, and I'm very impressed with it because they actually learned all the biblical currencies through it. And it's pretty impressive the kids know that, because I always had a hard time with it because we don't necessarily have the actual coins, and there's different opinions on the weights and everything like that. The game stuck to one opinion, but they learned half a shekel, dinner, 2 shekel is a dinner, it's isser, darka, and all these different types of sela and all these different things. So what is a kolbon? Okay, so that's the first calculation. I'm not going to go through it. And the kolbons aren't like shkalim. Rather, you put them, the money changers put them in a pile, and they go to hachodesh. Someone who forgot their shekel, who lost their shekel, you are responsible. You can't say, hey, I already had a half shekel, or, I already had a shekel, and I lost it. You're responsible until you give it to the gizbar. The gizbar is like the treasurer. The people who sent the shekel. So now people live far away. They have to give half a shekel. So they send it in the hands of a messenger, and it's stolen or he lost it. If they did not pay him to bring it there, then he can say, I swear it was stolen from me, and he's exempt, and the people have to give another half shekel. However, if people say, so now that is, okay, now if the people of the city tell him, they say, since we are paying, we don't want that he should swear, you don't listen to them. So the rabbis say, so if he swears to God that it was stolen from him, then he's exempt and we have to all pay. So comes out, the first shkalim that after he swore, these are shkalim, and they go for another year. And the first ones, they go to this year, and the last ones go, okay, so this is a different case. 1 second. Okay, comes out. The shkalim, if they find it, so now they found. Okay, so we all have to give another shekel because we sent it, right? We find it, we get it back, we recover it, we find the thief, etc., etc. If you find the first ones after he swore that it was stolen, they're both shkalim. So you cannot say, okay, now give me back the money that was lost because I already paid. It's already considered holy when it's dedicated to the half shekel. They're both shkalim, and you can't give it for another year. And the first ones go for this year, and the last ones could go for the previous year. They could go to the fund of the previous year. If you sent it on Shemer Sachar, so now let's say we pay somebody to bring it. Essentially, what we're paying for is insurance, right? We're paying a guy. You have a responsibility, because now if someone steals with it, he takes the hit. Now let's say there's a levels of insurance. If there's any negligence, he takes the hit. However, let's say armed robbers come to him and they go and they take it from him, he's exempt. We see if after we gave them, it was stolen from him, then he has to swear to he has to swear. So once you give it to him, it belongs to the temple. He has to swear to the treasures of the temple, and we are exempt because So if we see if after it was, what does this mean? Give me a second. So we look, if the funds in the temple treasure were already set aside, so then this is what we need to see. Then he has to swear to the treasurer, and the people of the city are exempt because he's giving on what already was accounted for in the temple. And the people of the city, what did they do? They give it to Shemer Sacher. He's liable, but a oinus is not common. And if it's before the funds were set aside, the people are still responsible. They need to pay. If they swear and they do it, if he swears and then they give it a second time, and afterwards he's robbed again, they're both shkalim, and they can't go for another year, and they both have to go for the previous year. There are those who say that the first shkalim that they go for this year, those are the shkalim which are stolen in the beginning, and they're stolen or lost, and they return. And there are other ones who say that the first shkalim go to the there are those who say that the first shkalim they go for this year, and those ones are stolen first, and those ones who say the second set go for this year. If you go give half a shekel to your friend to bring it to, if you give half a shekel to your friend, and he brings it to a money changer, and then he goes and he gives it for himself. If it was already given, so you gave a shekel, right? Now, again, this is not regular tzedakah. Once you give half a shekel, it's holy, right? So now, if you use that for something else, you use that coin for something else. It's not like money, like, okay, let's say tzedakah money could be used. In other words, let's say, I'll give an example, something common now. People give money to me to give to Israel, right? And now I ask the guy in Israel, how do I give it? He says, I take credit card, right? So what do I essentially need to do? I might need to swipe my credit card and take the money to pay my credit card, right? So that is how money works nowadays with tzedakah. The holy things like half shekel and stuff like that, it's actually the actual coin becomes holy. So like, let's say you have that actual coin and you mix it up with another coin, then you have to give both of them because one of them's holy, right? So here, someone gave half a shekel to his friend to bring to the money changer to deliver for him. He goes and he gives it himself in order. So if he gives it.
So is the money changer an intermediary?
So money changer, we'll stop here. Money changers are potentially intermediaries. It's like someone you can give to him in order to give your shekel, because basically not everyone can travel to the temple to give the shekel. So every city has representatives.
So if the money, when you give the shekel to the money changer,
you've done your mitzvah now.
But it's holy at that point.
Yes.
And he mixes it up with his other coins?
No, he has to keep it in a separate pile. Now, it's important to remember also, like in the biblical times, it was actually the shekel that was given. Like the actual coin was melted down. In the temple times, it was used as money. But we're extremely, extremely strict about money that goes to the temple, that if you use it, it's like a grave sin. And there's a whole other section. This is just the laws of half a shekel. Okay.
Was the shekel a significant amount of money?
No, I don't think so. I mean, $5, $10. I don't think so. At that time. Okay, let's start. We're going to Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, laws of Code of Jewish Law, and we have finished mezuzah. Now, the idea of finishing mezuzah is if you go and you date back. So a Jewish guy wakes up in the morning, he washes his hands, he says all the blessings, he uses the restroom, he cleans himself. He says the morning blessings. And then, in the order back then, is he would put his tefillin on. And then he would walk out of his house. Now, walk through the rooms of his house. Well, every room, every doorway needs a mezuzah. So we went through all the laws of him walking through the doorways of his house and setting up mezuzahs throughout his house. Now he left his house, and he's going to go to shul, and he's going to prepare himself for prayer. So now that's what we're holding in the day of a person. So, it's interesting, like you go through here, and it's actually very, very interesting. So for a long time in the Code of Jewish Law, it goes through the daily schedule, and then you have the nightly schedule, and then you have the holiday schedule, which is weekly, monthly, whatever it is, or hachodesh, all these different things. So now he's preparing himself for prayer. So soon we'll get to the laws of prayer, and you'll see laws of prayer are very, very long and detailed. But now we're going to the prep for prayer. It says in Amos, prepare yourself to meet God. So you have a mitzvah to prepare yourself for prayer. What do? Before you daven, you're supposed to prepare yourself. We have to have dignified garments, and we'll explain what that means, dignified garments. You should prepare yourself like you're going to meet a king. And that is even if you're praying privately, you should be dressed in a dignified way. You should be dressed properly. A lot of people have traditionally a specific garment that they wear while they're praying to show that, to make a symbolic garment of prayer. So, in places where it's customary to wear a belt, it is forbidden to pray without a belt. And we do that today. Now, the thing is back then they wore like gowns, men wore gowns. So, as we'll see later, you have to put on a belt. We mentioned earlier, you cannot say holy things unless you have a belt separating from your heart and your private part. But nowadays we have layers. We wear underclothing and pants and stuff like that. Okay. You should give to charity every morning before you pray. It says, I shall behold your face through charity. So that's another thing you're supposed to do. Gam yekabel alav kaidem kol atfila mitzvos v'havtarech kamecha. You should also accept upon yourself the love of every Jew. Every morning, it's one of the first things in a siddur. You should say, I love every Jew no matter what. You should love everyone like your soul. Because if there's any division between you and any other Jew, then that causes there's no unity above. When you go and you take upon yourself to love your fellow Jew with your whole heart, then that causes unity above in the spiritual cosmos. And then all the Jewish people's prayers become unified. And then they're all together. And then God loves prayers from unity, from Jewish people's unity. And that's why it's important to every day take upon yourself to really remove any resentment or anything in your heart. You'll see later on in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe has a very interesting approach to generally unity. And he says, whose fault is the lack of unity? Always your own. Always your own. You can always clear out. So the Alter Rebbe actually says, let's say someone's disturbing you in prayer. What should you do? What should you do? It means God is giving you a sign. You have to strengthen your prayer and not be disturbed. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. So in general, that's just an interesting perspective.
So you keep going.
Well, you need to stop and meditate and say, okay, I'm going to be more focused. And he said, a person always has to view things between you and your fellow Jew. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya says it doesn't matter if it's your fellow Jew or if it's like, the President of the United States comes in the room. Whenever in prayer you feel a lack of calmness, it's always on you. You have to meditate and focus more. Keep going, focus more, and know that it's just God sending you a reminder that you're not focused enough. That's So anyways, that's very important perspective here, I think, because I believe the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, believe it or not, he wasn't a Chabad Chassid, but he modeled his book after the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. Actually, the Code of Jewish Laws modeled after the Alter Rebbe's Code. So that is a very important perspective, that unity in Judaism is always blameless. In other words, if someone is hard on you, maybe you won't be able to talk to them, but you can always have compassion to them. Maybe they're messed up, or maybe this, or maybe that, or maybe you can always pray for them. Okay, Ksiv, Shmor Ragalcha Asher Telech El Beis Halakim. And he always said to me, how can you really love your fellow Jew? He's like, there's so many Jewish people in the media and politics which I dislike. But really, it is the job of every Jew to awaken the compassion on every Jew and every person, and awaken that compassion and open your heart to them. Okay. Ksiv, Shmor Ragalcha Kasher Telech El Beis Halakim. Guard your foot when you go to the house of God. B'darsh Rabbi Seinu Zechrein Levracha. The sage of blessed memory expound. Ragalcha Hainu Hanakavim Sheitzel Raglayim. This refers to the orifices which are adjacent to the feet. So what does it mean? You have to check yourself before you pray. You shouldn't need to use the restroom. Before you pray, you should make sure you need to use the restroom during prayer. If you even have the smallest need to use the restroom, you should not start praying. Also, you shouldn't start praying. You shouldn't even study Torah. It's considered disgraceful for your body, so you should use the restroom, and something you should be conscious of. Do I need the restroom before? And even if you need it a little bit, you should go. Now, let's say you already prayed and you didn't think about it. If you evaluated yourself that you're able to pray, you can go on a walk. You could go on a walk for a parsa, which is 72 minutes. Tefillah. Then your prayer is a prayer. And if you're not able to walk for a long time, your prayer is considered disgraceful and you need to pray again. There are those who say that if you know you can hold yourself for 72 minutes, then you are permitted to pray. So let's say you're going to go to the bathroom and you can go 72 minutes, and by the time you come back, the minyan is going to be over. Or it's going to be too late to pray. So then you can hold yourself and not use the restroom for the prayer time and do that. Okay. Now we're going to go a little bit more in this. Okay, so we said earlier, it's actually quite fascinating. What we consider human needs, the Jewish tradition considers like disgusting. It's so disgusting that humans need to use the bathroom. It's so disgraceful. We have a soul, we are godly, and like our bodies have these disgraceful limitations. That's an interesting thing, the way Judaism looks at it. Obviously, it's not our fault, but it's like the animal soul. It's like God gave us a body and it has disgraceful limitations. Our godly soul should be able to soar and not need any of this. That's like the attitude. So here it says, Misha Bariloi, someone who's certain Sheini Yachal. Okay, so we said that it's forbidden to pass gas in tefillin. We said earlier. So if someone really needs to do it, you have to take your tefillin off. Or hold it in. Misha Barilai, one who is certain that he cannot hold himself from passing gas until he finishes reading the Shema and the Shema Nesrei. It's better that let the time of reading the Shema pass. So this is like talking about if someone has diarrhea especially or something like that, where they're not able to stop passing gas for a certain time. He should wait till it passes. Vim avar zman tefillah, and if it passed, anusu. He's forced not to pray. And he can pray, as later on we'll say, if you miss a prayer, how to get back and do that prayer. And if he feels he could do it just for the Shema, he should pray. And then right away, during the Shema, he should put on his tefillin, and make a blessing on them, say the Shema, and then take them off. So that is with regard to passing gas during prayer. And it's quite a interesting thing. So now, this is all we're saying within the Shema prayer especially. How Judaism notes, that it's very, very interesting how Judaism notes that the body is like very vulnerable, disgraceful piece of work. You need to wash your hands with water out of perik until your wrist before you pray. Even if you prayed in the morning, if you touch something which is soiled, what does it mean, a soiled place? Places which are usually covered for a person. So if you go and you stick your hand and scratch your back, then you touch the skin, you need to wash your hands before praying. There are beads or places that are beads of sweat, but if you give a good scratch to your head, or you didn't wash them until the wrist in the morning, you need to wash them before prayer. If you don't have water, you have to go find water. You have to go the measurement of 4 mil, which the 4 mil is pretty far. Let's say you're traveling, you got to go back up to 4 mil to wash your hands. What if you come here and there's no water and you need to go wash your hands, and now you come back and prayers will be over? Menaki yad v'tzar afer. You can rub your hands in pebbles or earth, or b'chol minim denaka, or rub it on anything that cleans. O mispal, and then you could daven. Dechsiv, erchatz b'nekayin kavai, I pray with clean hands. Erchatz b'mayim emafshar, you do it with water. V'mlav b'nekayin, anything that is clean. Ve'im rachatz yadav v'bayk karai, ve'ein yadu aloi. If you washed your hands properly in the morning, and you don't have any knowledge, you didn't touch anything which is dirty, because since the time you woke up, and you might not be certain, but feel love in time, even if you're learning Torah, we don't pay attention to where our hands go. You should also wash your hands again for the prayers. However, if you're not certain, you don't have to run after and you know you're going to miss the prayer with the minyan. You shouldn't go after water. That's why every synagogue has a sink when you walk in. One day we'll have one here, but that's why, because ideally when you enter, you're supposed to wash your hands. And that's why if you go to the kotel, there's first thing is a big sink for that reason. And if you go to, big synagogues, they'll actually have like 20 sinks because people come in for prayer. You might have daily prayer. You might have 500 people come in the morning, and you don't want them to all have to wait in line to wash their hands. So they'll have like 20 sinks, and everyone goes and washes their hands. All right, we'll stop here. Any questions?
Does this attitude toward the bodily functions being